Welcome back to Fright Note Originals. Tonight, we descend into the tunnels beneath New York City, a place millions pass through every day without ever truly seeing what's hiding in the dark. But there are rules for riding the subway at night. Rules whispered on Reddit threads and scrawled on dirty station walls. Break them, and you might find yourself on a train that never stops. Subscribe to Fright Note and hit that notification bell so you never miss another journey into darkness. This is the Subway Rules.
It's 2:09 a.m. in New York City. Lexi Ramos, 26, leans on a graffiti-scarred column at the Canal Street station, shivering in her scrubs. The platform smells of grease, iron dust, and faintly of wet stone. Of course the F train's delayed, she mutters. Lexi's a nurse, working doubles. Exhausted, broke. A distant wind sweeps through the tunnel, rattling trash across the rails. Above her, someone has scrawled on the tile wall in black marker. Subway Rules 1. Don't make eye contact with the man reading a blank newspaper. 2. If the lights go out between stops, close your eyes. Don't open them until the train moves again. 3. If the train door opens in the tunnel, don't look outside, no matter who calls your name. Lexi's urban legends, she says under her breath. People with too much time. A stranger approaches a man, steps closer, pale, hollow cheeks, a dark business suit. He's holding a folded newspaper, empty white pages. Lexi's eyes drift up to his, blank, gray, like dried cement. Bad night, he rasps. Real bad night for rules. Lexi's heart stutters. She forces a shaky laugh. Hey buddy, keep your distance. He steps even closer. The rules keep them out, keep you from being seen. But you already broke one. She tries to push past him. He grabs her wrist. When the lights go out, you close your eyes. Remember that? The train arrives with a scream of metal. The F train bursts into the station. Lexi yanks away from the stranger and dives into the first car. When she turns back, the man is gone. Her reflection stares at her in the dark glass of the subway window, eyes wide. A disembodied voice echoes in the car. Next stop, 2nd Avenue. The train rumbles forward. Blackout halfway between stations. The lights snap off. Pitch black. Someone breathes close to Lexi's ear. Open your eyes, Lexi. She squeezes her eyes shut. Nails bite into her palms. A slick whisper slides around her. Come look outside. It's beautiful. Something brushes her cheek cold, damp. Then a long silence. The lights flicker back on. Gone when Lexi opens her eyes. The train car is empty. No other passengers. No noise. Only her reflection staring back. Eyes shimmering silver for a split second before returning to brown. She staggers to the door. Hello, anyone? A distant PA crackles. Please remember the rules. The train pulls into 2nd Avenue. Lexi stumbles out, hyperventilating. On the tiled wall, someone has scribbled in dripping red letters. You're already on the other side.
Lexi staggered along the deserted platform at 2nd Avenue, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as she struggled to steady her breath. Eyes locked on the red letters scrawled across the grimy tiles. The words dripping as if freshly painted, or worse yet, as if bleeding. She reached out a trembling hand, her fingertips brushing the letters, half expecting warm wetness, but instead, a chill like touching ice shot up her arm, leaving her skin prickling with goosebumps. From behind her, a low voice spoke, startling her so badly she spun around, heart hammering in her chest. And there by the turnstiles stood a man in an MTA worker's reflective vest, his face strangely pale under the flickering lights, skin the sickly color of chewed gum, his eyes sunken and impossibly tired. "Miss, you look lost," he said, his voice gravelly yet oddly calm, as though he'd seen this same scenario play out countless times. Lexi tried to compose herself, swallowing hard, but her words came out brittle. "Where's everyone else? Why's the station so empty?" she demanded, scanning for any other commuters, for any sign of normalcy. But the platforms were eerily silent, except for the hum of electric lights and the faint echo of distant trains rumbling unseen through tunnels. The man tilted his head slowly, eyes glimmering like glass marbles. "Depends which side you're on," he replied cryptically, stepping closer so she could smell the sharp tongue of rust and stale subway air on his clothes. Lexi took a half step back, adrenaline screaming in her veins. But the man simply reached into his vest and pulled out a small, folded slip of grimy paper, the edges yellowed and fragile, as if it had passed through 1,000 hands. "You've already broken Rule 1, he said, voice dropping to a hush, as though afraid of being overheard, though the station appeared utterly deserted. "You saw the man with the blank newspaper. That makes you visible now, the things that live between the stops." Lexi shivered as images flashed in her mind, the blank eyes, the white pages, the sensation that the shadows were pressing closer around her, even now. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, voice trembling, but the man shook his head grimly. "Meaning doesn't matter. You broke the first rule. Now you need to know the others, or you're going to vanish just like the rest." Carefully, he unfolded the slip of paper and held it so she could read the faded words scrawled in dark ink. 4. If you hear knocking on the subway walls, never knock back. 5. If a second train pulls up beside yours in the tunnel, do not switch cars, no matter who waves at you. Lexi stared at the list, her eyes tracing the letters as if willing them to make sense, her brain reeling under the weight of these impossible rules. But before she could respond, a low rumble filled the tunnel, growing into a thunderous roar as another train glided into the station, its silver doors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Through its windows, Lexi could see passengers packed shoulder to shoulder, dressed in faded clothing that looked decades out of date, pinstripe suits, fedoras, flapper dresses, a silent crowd, all staring forward as if frozen in time, until one man in a dark fedora turned his head and smiled directly at her. "Come on over," the man called out, his voice eerily bright, waving enthusiastically as though inviting an old friend to join a party. "Plenty of seats, Lexi." Lexi felt her legs begin to move of their own accord, drawn toward the open doors. But the MTA man clamped a surprisingly strong hand around her arm and yanked her back so hard she nearly lost her balance. "Don't move," he growled, eyes suddenly sharp with a glint of fear. The man in the fedora kept waving, but his smile widened far beyond what a human face should allow, stretching until his jaw seemed to split open like a snake's, revealing rows of needle-like black teeth glistening under the flickering lights. "Come join us, Lexi," he hissed, his voice dropping several octaves into a guttural rumble, the sound slithering over her skin like cold slime. Lexi recoiled in horror as the second train screeched and sparks erupted from the rails, the monstrous passengers vanishing behind grimy glass as the cars rolled away, leaving only the smell of burnt metal hanging in the air. She collapsed against a support pillar, her chest heaving with ragged gasps as tears spilled down her cheeks, her mind struggling to comprehend how her simple commute had spiraled into this living nightmare. The MTA man crouched beside her, his expression weary and sorrowful. "You're in it now," he murmured, his voice softening. "There's no easy way back. The rules, they're the only chance you've got." Lexi shook her head violently, sobbing as she remembered the soft voice whispering her name in the dark just moments before. "The man on the platform said I already broke the rules," she whispered, gripping the fabric of her scrub so tightly that her fingers ached. The MTA man nodded solemnly. "They mark you once you look at them. You're visible now, Lexi. The tunnels, they know your name, and they'll try to keep you." Lexi squeezed her eyes shut as the memory of her brother Owen surfaced, how he'd vanished 3 years ago, stepping onto a train that never reached its next station, leaving her family shattered and her own mind teetering on the edge of believing in things she had no words for. "Are you real?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The MTA man gave her a tired, crooked smile, as though he'd been asked that question more times than he could count. "Real enough," he said. "I used to drive the queue line until I missed a rule." Lexi wiped her face with trembling hands, swallowing the sour taste of fear. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "You have to finish your ride," he said firmly, rising to his feet. "Go back to the station where you started, and you have to follow every rule from now on, no matter what." "Can't I just leave? Go topside?" The man's eyes grew dark as he shook his head slowly. "No, if you step out into the streets before you finish your loop, they'll follow you, and they'll drag you fully to the other side." Lexi exhaled shakily. "What's your name?" He hesitated for the first time, then murmured quietly, "Marcos." Lexi nodded, clinging to the small comfort of having at least one name to hold on to in the dark. "Okay, Marcos, tell me what to do." Marcos pointed back toward the tracks as the low growl of an approaching train echoed through the station. "The train will come for you again," he said. "This time, follow every rule. And remember this last one." He leaned closer, his breath cold against her cheek as he whispered, 6. If the lights flicker and the conductor's voice changes, do not speak. Pretend to be asleep. A metallic scream rang out as another F train coasted into the station, its silver cars empty, the open doors waiting like a silent invitation. Marcos urged her forward, his voice strained. "This is it, kid. Finish your loop. Don't break another rule." Lexi turned to look back at him one last time, but the platform behind her was empty. Marcos vanished as if he'd never existed. With trembling limbs, she climbed aboard the train, sinking into a seat, clutching the cold metal pole as the doors hissed shut and the train jerked forward, carrying her deeper into the tunnel's waiting dark. A moment later, the intercom crackled overhead. Next stop, Canal Street. And from the seat across from her, a voice spoke softly, painfully familiar. "Lexi, why didn't you look for me?" Lexi's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she stared at the pale figure sitting across from her. It was her brother Owen, his face streaked with silent tears, his voice as fragile as glass. "You left me here," he said. Lexi felt her throat tighten as she struggled not to sob. "Owen, no. I tried. I swear I tried." Owen leaned closer, his cold fingers reaching for hers across the empty space. "Come with me, Lexi. The other side isn't so bad." Lexi felt her body trembling violently as she remembered Marcus's final rule: do not speak. Pretend to be asleep. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing her trembling body to remain perfectly still, while silent tears streamed down her cheeks. A sudden violent flicker of the train, lights lit up the car like lightning. When the lights snapped back on, Owen was gone, leaving only empty seats and silence. But his voice seemed to echo from nowhere, soft and lingering. "You broke the rules once. Don't break them again." As the train thundered through the tunnel, Lexi's pulse hammered like the screech of metal wheels on steel rails, and she realized she wasn't just trying to get home anymore, she was trying to survive the ride. The wheels screeched as the train barreled through the darkness, the lights flickering overhead in a stuttering rhythm like a dying pulse, each flash revealing fleeting images in the windows, faces pressed against the glass from the outside, staring in with hollow, hungry eyes, vanishing the instant the car went dark again. Lexi sat rigid in her seat, her hands wrapped so tightly around the metal pole that her knuckles burned white, her mind spiraling with the echo of Owen's voice, still hearing him whispering her name as if he hovered only inches away, invisible but impossibly close. She wanted to scream, to bolt off the train at the next station, to run out into the streets and never look back, but Marcus's warning roared in her memory like the roar of the rails, and she knew if she left the subway now, she'd be pulled into that unseen place where the rules no longer applied and the tunnels claimed you forever. The intercom crackled suddenly, a burst of static so sharp it made her flinch, and then a voice came over the speakers, deeper and more distorted than before, every syllable drawn out as though stretched through tar. Nexus, stoop, Kahanal, street. Lexi froze, remembering Marcus's final rule. If the conductor's voice changes, do not speak. Pretend to be asleep. She clenched her teeth, lowering her head and letting her eyes drift half closed, though every nerve in her body screamed at her to stay alert, to watch every corner of the car for something emerging from the shadows. Outside the windows, shapes moved in the black tunnel, their forms indistinct, but somehow bipedal, dragging themselves along the walls with slow, deliberate motions, as though they were pacing the train, waiting for the right moment to slip inside. A gentle voice whispered beside her ear, soft as silk and somehow wetter than speech should sound. "Lexi, open your eyes. You're almost safe. Look at me." She kept her eyelids drooped, letting silent tears slide down her cheeks, forcing her breath into slow, measured gulps. "I'm here to help you," the voice insisted. "It's okay to look. It's okay to talk to me." She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, willing herself to remain silent, pretending to drift in exhausted sleep, even as fear thudded in her chest like a second heartbeat. Suddenly, something brushed across her hair, the touch cold and slick, like wet seaweed sliding over her scalp, and Lexi's muscles seized so hard her legs nearly kicked out. "You're not even supposed to be here," the voice said in a low hiss. "But if you come with us, we'll show you where your brother is." Her eyes stayed shut, her breath shallow and trembling. The doors opened. Without warning, the train lurched and squealed into a station, and the doors slid open with a metallic sigh, revealing the Canal Street platform bathed in pale light that shimmered like water rippling across white tiles. Lexi felt an almost magnetic pull trying to drag her from her seat, as if unseen hands were urging her to step out, to abandon her ride and escape into the illusion of safety. But she remembered Marcus's words, "Finish your loop. Go back to where you started." So she remained seated, her body trembling, staring at the floor as the train's doors stayed open longer than any normal stop should allow. She could feel something waiting on the platform, something shifting just outside her peripheral vision, watching her with intent, so sharp she felt it slice through the humid air. A new voice spoke from the darkness beyond the doors, a woman's voice, gentle, heartbreakingly familiar. "Lexi, sweetie, it's Mom. Please come off the train. You're scaring me." Lexi's head jerked up despite herself, and for an instant she saw her mother standing on the tiles, wearing the same blue coat she used to wear during winter mornings when she dropped Lexi at school. But the longer Lexi stared, the more wrong her mother's eyes looked, wide and glassy, like doll's eyes, unfocused and unblinking. "Mom," Lexi croaked, before slamming her lips shut, horrified that she'd spoken. Her mother's face split open in a wide, unnatural grin that reached nearly to her ears, revealing rows of small black teeth glistening like oil. "Come home with me, baby," the creature said in her mother's voice. "Don't you miss Owen?" A long, pale hand stretched out, fingers too many joints long, beckoning. Lexi felt her entire body quake with the instinct to run, to leap from the train and fling herself into her mother's arms, to believe that somehow all this terror could end if she just obeyed. But deep in her gut, she knew that stepping off the train meant crossing into a place she'd never return from. So she screamed, a wordless primal sound, and slammed her palm against the closed door button. The metal doors snapped shut like jaws, slicing through the creature's outstretched arm, which retracted with a wet, gurgling hiss. The train surged forward again, leaving Canal Street behind in a blur of white lights and flickering shadows. A silent passenger. As the train gathered speed, Lexi slumped in her seat, tears spilling freely, her chest heaving with sobs of pure exhaustion. She wanted to collapse, to surrender to sleep, but she forced herself upright, scanning the car for any sign that another entity might be lurking in the shadows. That's when she saw him. Owen sat 2 rows down, his head bowed, his hair falling into his eyes, his body looking heartbreakingly solid and real in the harsh fluorescence. Slowly, he lifted his head and met her gaze, his eyes dark and shimmering with sadness rather than malice. "I'm sorry, Lexi," he said softly, his voice trembling like a child's. "I didn't know the rules. I thought I'd be able to come home." Lexi's vision blurred as she choked on a sob. "I looked for you," she whispered, voice raw and ragged. "I never stopped looking." Owen nodded slowly, his lips twitching as though trying to smile through the weight of grief. "I know, but it's too late for me. It doesn't have to be for you." He stood up, his figure flickering like a faulty projection, as if he existed only half in this world and half in the blackness between stations. "Keep riding, Lexi. Remember the rules. Don't ever break them again." Lexi reached out a hand, desperate to touch him, but her fingers passed through empty air as Owen faded away like smoke in a breeze, leaving her alone once more. Returning to Canal A, mechanical voice called out from the speaker, suddenly crisp and normal again. "Next stop, Canal Street." Lexi exhaled shakily, realizing with dawning hope that the voice was no longer warped, no longer dripping malice. As the train rolled into Canal Street, she felt the subtle, almost imperceptible pop in her ears, as though surfacing from deep water, the sense of oppressive weight lifting from her chest. When the doors opened, the platform looked normal commuters chatting, the sounds of distant saxophone music echoing through the tunnels, the fluorescent lights steady and bright. Lexi stepped off the train, trembling, feeling as though the tiled floor beneath her feet might vanish at any second. A warm breeze stirred her hair, carrying the familiar smell of damp stone and city dust, but no voices whispered her name, and no shadows lunged from the darkness. As she turned to look back at the train, the doors hissed shut, and she caught one last glimpse of Owen standing inside, his expression peaceful, his lips moving silently around words she couldn't quite hear. Then the train pulled away, disappearing into the tunnel. Free. For now, Lexi staggered up the station stairs and emerged into the cool night air of the city. Neon lights blinking overhead, taxis honking, the chaos of New York rolling on as if nothing had ever happened. She paused at the top of the steps, breathing deeply, letting the reality of the city wash over her like a cleansing wave. But as she turned to leave, she spotted a new message scrawled on the station wall in sharp black marker, the letters stark against white tiles. The rules never end. Lexi might have stepped back into the neon lights of New York City, but the subway rules will always be waiting for her. And for anyone who dares to ride after midnight. In a city that never sleeps, some tunnels should remain forever unseen. This was the second episode of Fright Note Originals. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, so you'll be the first to hear the next story waiting just beyond the flickering lights. And remember, obey the rules, because not everything underground wants to let you go. Until next time, stay afraid.